Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board the Bernier bus train. Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernier Bus Show. I've got my Tim Pool hat on, but you already know I'm bald. The global working class is rising and the corporate media is ignoring it. And then we've talked about this before with Crystal Ball. I wanted to show you some of the protests because it's a big deal. And what this show with the Michael Brooks show, what you see is that there's a real enemy here. There's a real adversary that the working class around the world, including in Chicago, is fighting. And this enemy is neoliberalism. And so this particular interview with Crystal Ball makes that crystal clear. Before we jump into that, let me show you a little bit from yesterday. We've got Elizabeth Warren, a new article by Benjamin Studebaker, which I think Benjamin is a good person to add to the mix we had yesterday. Different people yesterday, I showed you how they are debunking the Elizabeth Warren Medicare for All plan. After a great deal of prodding from both centrist and lefty critics, Elizabeth Warren finally put out her Medicare for All plan. The problem is that the plan is both unrealistic on its own terms and openly pretend. Let me show you how. Before I dig into the proposal, I want to highlight this line from page 2. We must fix this system, and over the long term, there's the word long term highlighted, the best way to achieve that goal is to move from the system we have now to a system of Medicare for all. See that phrase, long term? That's code to rich people for this is all pretend. Most presidential candidates will tell you that they're going to do stuff in the first 100 days, or even on their very first day. When wannabe presidents tell you they're going to do something right away, it usually doesn't happen, but at least you have some reason to think they might try. Warren put long term in this plan to send an unequivocal message to the rich and the powerful that she isn't serious about this and doesn't care. I hope that we get the word out. I know it's not going to happen soon, but I hope eventually the corporate media take the signaling from the smaller independent leftist media about Elizabeth Warren's daughter, Amelia. We need to understand why Elizabeth is sending these unequivocal signals to the rich and powerful. She uses the phrase over and over. On the next page, but wait, maybe you missed it. Page 2, page 3, page 4, long term, long term, long term. Twice more, page 5. In case you forget, one more on page 19. And the American people know that in the long term, a simple system that covers everybody, blah, blah, blah. Harry Reid, who encouraged Warren to run, I love this, I've shown this clip before. Harry Reid, who encouraged Warren to run for Senate and help jumpstart her career, is on the record doubting her commitment to the proposal. Harry Reid tells David Axelrod that he doesn't think Elizabeth Warren will follow through on Medicare for all. Give her some time. I think that she's not in love with that. I think that you'll wait and see how that all turns out. Oh, I know she's pragmatic. Just wait. And David Axelrod, he says, oh, great. Really? You think so? Oh, that's a relief. If Elizabeth Warren really wanted people to believe she was committed to Medicare for all, she'd at least do us the courtesy of pretending she'd try to do it right away. Okay, so we get that point. Okay, point granted. Yesterday we had Kyle Kulinski talking about how she's doing, the way she's talking about it now is better than the even more weaselly way she used to talk about it, like pathways, and the way to lower the age and other garbage. And so he debunks the pathways language. Elizabeth Warren likes to pretend Bernie's bill doesn't exist. In September, she used another code word, calling Medicare for All a framework. By calling Medicare for All a framework, Warren insinuates that it has no specific content and could mean whatever you want it to mean. At the time, Warren was acting as if Medicare for All were a mere slogan. But you can go on Bernie Sanders' website. It's been up since 2016. It's still up. You can go there and see that you can actually calculate your savings with real numbers with Bernie Sanders. Anyway, yesterday we talked about the waffling and the fact that it is a tax on the middle class, but it's an indirect and very regressive tax. And so go back and watch yesterday's show for that message. I won't rehash it. Here's another angle on Elizabeth Warren, what no one tells you about a Warren versus Trump matchup. Tim talks about the polling and mentions, before the place I'm starting here, he mentions that polling is likely voters, likely Democrat voters, leaving out Republicans who support Sanders, leaving out young people who support Sanders, and most of all, leaving out independents who support Sanders, a huge block of voters. And so he recaps that here, and then we see what's going on in battleground states. If we don't pay attention to battleground states, both what happened in 2016 and what's happening now, we're going to be looking at exactly what happened to Hillary in 2016.
Of polls. So let's recap. Polls are only as good as the sample, only as good as the people that you poll. In the polls that you've been hearing, from Morning Consult to CNN's polls to anybody's polls you've been checking out, they have been usually, typically, unless otherwise stated, they are from likely Democratic voters, not from independents, which certain candidates do very well with independents, such as Bernie Sanders, which also happens to be the largest voting bloc in America. And it doesn't include new voters, which some candidates do better with, such as Bernie Sanders with younger voters, and disaffected voters who didn't vote last time because they were so pissed about their options.
That's a big one.
And analyst Harry Enton joins us with these new battleground poll numbers. What do you see, Harry?
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting what we see. So let's just give you a kind of reminder of this, set the stage here. So remember, in the 2016 presidential campaign, what do we see? We saw nationwide Hillary Clinton beating Donald Trump 48-46. But in the 6 closest states that Trump won that helped determine the Electoral College, Arizona, Florida, Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Trump won by a point. So let's take a look at these new battleground polls and compare them to what we're seeing nationally. And we see a trend line here that is consistent with what happened in 2016. So nationwide, if you take a look at the average poll for 2020 from October, we see Biden up by 8, Sanders up by 6, Warren up by 5. But take a look at these 6 closest states, again, that Trump won in 2016, according to new polls from the New York Times Siena College. If you average across the 6, what do we see? We see Biden +1. We see Sanders actually losing to Trump by 1. And we see Warren trailing at Trump by 3 points.
That's important. What you see here is that there's a difference between Biden, Sanders, and Warren. Biden is going to do better with likely voters that are typically sampled in polls because they're likely Democratic voters. You'd expect if you're leaving out independents and you're leaving out new voters, young voters, then you're going to have Biden ahead of Bernie. But if you have Elizabeth, you're going to have even more of a bias because Elizabeth doesn't attract new voters. She attracts old voters like Biden. She attracts well-educated voters who are likely to vote. So in this picture, Sanders would be ahead of Biden, and Warren would be even farther behind Biden and behind Trump than it shows here. This is important because when you see the polls as we get closer to February and then on through from February to July, when you see the polls in the battleground states, you're going to see them close, Bernie and Trump close. And until Biden finally drops out, you're going to see Biden and Trump close. But that doesn't tell the story because we're leaving out the independents and the new voters. But what this shows you now is he's going to go on to say that Elizabeth Warren is behind by the most in all of these battleground states. And it's because of they're pissed. Like Tim said, they're pissed because these battleground states have been ravaged by trade agreements and they've been ignored, and their water isn't clean and their schools are terrible and they're in dire economic straits, and the news doesn't talk about this. But here's mainstream news explaining that Elizabeth Warren is going to get her ass kicked in all of these states. It's just painfully obvious. If you're worried that Sanders and Trump are so close in all these, that's another reason to take hope from the idea of all the new voters that are coming out. I'm a college teacher. I teach young people, and the young people are not on board with Trump as a whole. There are Trump supporters in college, but Bernie is kicking ass with college students and seniors in high school, like my daughter Emma. You've got people coming on board who have never voted before, who aren't even 18 yet, and those voters absolutely are more for Bernie than they are for Donald Trump.
The president is leading Warren in those 6 battleground states by 3 points. Let's break it down a little bit further in terms of those battleground states particularly. So I've broken them down into the northern battlegrounds and the southern battlegrounds. What do we see in the northern battlegrounds? So in Michigan, which of course is a very key state, we see Biden up by 1, we see Sanders leading by 3, but we see Donald Trump beating Elizabeth Warren by 4 percentage points. That's a big difference between those different candidates. What about in Pennsylvania? Obviously, Scranton Joe, Normal Joe, all that stuff. Joe Biden leading in Pennsylvania by 1 point over Donald Trump. Sanders, though, trailing by a point. What do we see Elizabeth Warren? We see Elizabeth Warren trailing Donald Trump by 2 points. How about in Wisconsin, another key state? Remember, Hillary Clinton didn't visit Wisconsin. What do we see? We see Joe Biden up by 2 points in Wisconsin over Donald Trump. We see a tie with Bernie Sanders, but Warren, again, trailing by 2 percentage points. So this is something consistent where Warren is running behind Joe Biden.
So we've got likely voters in battleground states, not even including the independents and the Trump supporters and the young people, who are clearly not in favor of Elizabeth Warren. And Hillary Clinton should have paid more attention to that last time, and Elizabeth Warren should pay more attention to it this time. All right, now we're skipping ahead to Michael Brooks interviewing Crystal Ball.
Across the globe, from Chile to Chicago, Lebanon, Iraq, definitely in 2018 in Sudan, certainly in Haiti, Ecuador. Okay, all of these places have their particularities. There's Catalonia. There's different contexts, obviously. But this is a really dynamic global uprising, and it really does share a very specific focus on austerity and neoliberalism, to the point where specifically I would say in places like Iraq and in Lebanon, they're taking precise aim at the sort of sectarian systems and saying, look,
right,
I don't care about this. You can't, as an example, tax WhatsApp. You have used the language specifically in the past, Crystal, of a global working class uprising, as well as the challenges of delivering on left-wing populism. When you look at this, I mean, what are your takeaways from watching this emerge right now?
Yeah, and look, I don't want to oversimplify because, like you said, there are different dynamics at play in all of these places. But when you look from country to country, and when you look just at the sheer number and massive scale of the uprisings happening around the globe, and I love that you included Chicago and what's happening with the teachers' movement right here at home, you can't help but realize that the neoliberal world order put in place by the United States of America has completely failed, and people are calling bullshit. And so whether it's, a tax on WhatsApp whether it's a fare hike, whether it's a gasoline tax, whatever it is, that's the final spark. People are they're just done, and they're taking matters into their own hands. I mean, Chile is particularly interesting, I think, because you had this country that was like held up as the model of, this sort of neoliberal, wealthy model. But underneath that, you had some horrible inequality. You had people who were really struggling to make it, where day-to-day life just was filled with pressure after pressure. And, very similar dynamic to what we see here, where the rich are getting richer and everybody else is just screwed with wage stagnation and high cost of education. They have a highly privatized country. Of course, our fingerprints are all over what's happened in their politics, not to mention, of course, Iraq, not to mention Lebanon with the number of Syrian refugees they've had to take in. So in any case, it's remarkable to see the common threads that are there. And at the same time, it's like complete silence in our media. I mean, even with the teachers' movement that's happened here, that's the largest labor uprising that we've had, certainly in our lifetime. And it's never treated like that. I mean, they might do a story here or there on this individual strike or this individual, movement, but it's never tied together as a cohesive set of demands and the kind of national movement that it really truly is, because it doesn't have the one thing. It's hard to tie it into like a Trump is bad story, which is like, it's hard to make it into either a Trump is good or Trump is bad story, which is basically all the media really wants to focus on right now. And it's also inconvenient, right? It's inconvenient to look at West Virginia or Kentucky and see that there's a solidarity there between, them and Chicago and Oakland, right? That doesn't make sense with the narrative that the media is set up. They truly just can't wrap their heads around it. And then with the uprisings around the globe, like, it's very obvious why that wouldn't get coverage by the media. It's incredibly inconvenient, as I just said, because the U.S.'s fingerprints are all over, these countries, and have, in many cases, very directly impacted the uprisings that are happening right now. And there's just not a convenient narrative around it. I was thinking back when I was first getting into media, it was the Arab Spring. And every time there was a new uprising, media was all over it because there was a convenient narrative around it. First of all, there was all this like techno-optimism. Oh, Facebook and like social media is making the world amazing, right? So there was that. But then it also fit into this very convenient narrative about like, people are choosing democracy and like, we were right, like we were right to come in and say, here's how you should change your countries. And so it kind of fit into that lane as well. Whereas with these uprisings, global working class power, a rejection of the neoliberal system that's been the status quo that these media organizations are very much bought into, and oftentimes their consumers support as well. That doesn't work so well.
Yeah, 100%. And we're going to play this later, but one of the chants that people are saying in Chile is, and I don't know how this translates in Spanish, but I'm sure it sounds better than it does in English. But the point, they're chanting that basically neoliberalism was born here and it's going to die here, right? Like specifically Chile is ground zero. Well, I mean, yeah, right? Like you have the 73 CIA-backed coup, and then it becomes a laboratory. All the Chicago guys go there. I mean, that's what's getting synchronized with the Pinochet mass killings. And I think another symptom, like you were saying about these convenient narratives, like Chile transitioned to democracy in such a way that all of the old power and wealth and market relationships were not changed. So you still have decades of formal democracy. And I guess that's the media is obsessed with Trump and it doesn't fit a convenient narrative. But also it's like, this is the only answer to Trump and they're missing it.
Right. This is the only answer to Trump and they're missing it. Why are we missing it? okay, it isn't just inconvenience, it's also money. Big money funds CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, on and on, corporate media. Big money doesn't want us to see all the workers rising up in protest. Big money doesn't want us to figure out that they're the problem. Big money is happy if we blame immigrants. Big money is happy if we blame each other. And so if we see the whole world rising up solidly in protest against neoliberalism, we may get ideas like Chicago teachers or West Virginia teachers or Kentucky teachers or other people who are saying enough is enough. The big force here is labor. When workers say we won't work. Now, before we're all automated and it won't matter if we rise up, we'll still be able to turn cars over and burn things up. But and that's coming, I think. But what we need to do now, while we still can, is peacefully say we're not going to work until you assholes make things right. A lot of the protests are about austerity measures. A lot of the protests are about the working class conditions, about taxing, about fuel subsidies and things that directly impact. A lot of the workers are truck drivers. And so as a part-time truck driver, I think it's important for teachers especially and truck drivers to think together. Even though truck drivers are typically Republicans and teachers are typically Democrats, Republicans and Democrats are both screwing us over. I think we need to wake up and realize that workers, if we stick together, teachers and truckers, if they work together, could shut the country down instantly and keep it shut down until things get better. What I guess the point of showing you all these protests is to realize that neoliberalism is the enemy and that labor, organizing and protesting and denying the oligarchs' labor is the way to fix it. And so in these, like in Quito, in Ecuador, we've got people demanding things and getting things by protesting. The world is on fire, and they don't want you to see it. And I guess that's the point. And then going back to Bernie or bust, going back to the swing states where Elizabeth Warren is going to get her ass handed to her on a plate by Donald Trump. And Bernie's going to have a fight in those states. It's not going to be a foregone conclusion, even with new voters, because the new voters don't always, well, especially in the primaries, it's going to be, Bernie is going to beat Elizabeth in the swing states, in the primaries probably, but when it comes to the general, what we have to do is make sure that the young voters and the independent voters and the disenfranchised voters they have to find out what socialism is, for one thing. That's another story. But they also have to realize what Donald Trump hasn't done for them and what Bernie Sanders could do, assuming that we get labor organized. Now this video, it takes longer to watch all this and to hear all this than most people have in their day for digesting news. So it's up to all of us to spread this word around. We need to watch the Michael Brooks show. We need to watch The Hill Rising with Crystal and Sagar. We need to watch Jimmy Dore. We need to watch Lee Camp. We need to watch Kyle Kulinski and all of the lefties that I feature on the Bernie or Bust show. I'm trying to give you a compendium of what's going on that the corporate news doesn't want you to see. So you can if you have a limited time, watch this show. But if you can, get to all of the links that I put in the information section under each of the Bernie or Bust show episodes so you can see what's going on the left that they don't want you to see. All right, then. Hope to see you tomorrow. Keep on burning. Keep on drinking coffee. Keep on causing trouble. Bernie or Bust! Get on board the Bernie or Bust train. Come get on board the Bernie or Bust train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board